Hey, Nanya, what's going on?
Hey John, how you doing?
Doing great. Really excited we have to do this and get back together. It's been such a long time since we've spoken and to come back and talk about great Warriors team on this No Trade Clause podcast. I've already spoken to you a bunch of times, obviously, both as friends and on Gen Z Hoops about all the cool stuff you do. But I mean, we haven't spoken about this season yet. And I'm really excited to kind of get a deep dive into what your experience has been like, kind of seeing this team firsthand at the scorers table, seeing it all play out and some magical basketball with this team that's on a roll right now in the NBA.
Yeah, if you look at the current roster, there's not a ton of differences from the last year, but the way this team plays, it's a world of difference. And I love getting a front row seat to watch them play. This is a really exciting year. I'm really hoping for another championship run, and I can't wait to see what happens.
So we're definitely going to talk about all the players that make this team special. And there's so many guys, right, that maybe there aren't household names yet that are still such an integral part of this team winning basketball games. But we got to start off with this podcast off with a bang. We're not going to waste time getting to this. Talk to us about Steph Curry and just the brilliance that you've been seeing from him the last few, I mean, years, of course, but obviously now this season, how he's really shattering 3-point records and really just making the most out of this young team.
It's so funny that the conversation around Steph can ever turn to like he's past his prime or any kind of negative conversation, to be honest, because he is what I believe the greatest show on earth to watch. Like every game just dazzling you with something new. You talked about his 3-point record this season. He is going to break, I believe it's Ray Allen's record for all time made 3-pointers. That'll happen probably within the next month or so. He went multiple games with nine threes in a row. You've seen if you've seen a graphic circulating on social media, it's like players with a number of games that players have had 9+ threes made in a game. Steph's at 37, I think, and I think everyone else in NBA history combined hasn't even reached that. So it's really electrifying to watch. And the one thing that you see that he's done the last 2 seasons is really dedicate himself to the weight room. One thing that people have always said about him prior to the last 2 years is that if you play physical with Steph, you push him around a little bit, then you take him away from his game, and he's eliminated that so-called weakness that he has, and now he can get to the rim, finish through contact. He runs all over the court. Like he probably averages like 5 miles running a game. So it's just there's not really a ton of words that you could say to describe Stephen Curry other than it's just kind of awe-inspiring to watch.
So I just did my research really quickly because you mentioned how he's about to pass Ray Allen, and when you said it's in the next month, the light bulbs went off in my head. I did some calculations just now. If he averages 5 threes a game over the next 7 games, he's on pace to break that in Madison Square Garden in the world's most famous arena on December 14th. I mean, that would be very special to me. I mean, but if I get to see it, though, you don't get to see it in person, which I don't know how I feel about that.
I mean, Steph loves Madison Square Garden. He's the kind of player that's built for the stage that New York City offers him. But another potential game that it could be is, December 20th, which to Warriors fans is an exciting potential date. Like we'll get to that part later, but for multiple things to happen on that day that we are hoping for. Um, I think any of these games coming up will be really exciting to see Steph break that record.
Those poor Sacramento Kings, man. December 20th is going to be one rude awakening for that team. Just from the time they wake up until they go to bed at night, they're gonna have some headaches over there in Sacramento. Look, we could talk about Steph all night, and he'll definitely be coming up over and over again during the show. But whether it's defensively or in the locker room, everyone knows that's Draymond Green. And over the last few years, he's gotten some hate from just like the NBA in general, just for whether it's the way his plays, his games changed or stuff like that, or the whole, everything that revolves on Draymond. But he's playing really well this season, and he's a big reason as to why they're winning games. Just not just because of his offensive game now, but just obviously he's always been a renowned defender and a defensive player of the year. So what are you really thinking from him that's really been the difference between maybe a year or two ago when everyone thought that his best years are behind him, to now where he's really looking like the old Draymond.
Anyone that had kind of listened to Gen Z Hoops last year knew that I was pretty hard on Draymond myself, and you can see a very clear difference between the Draymond of this year and the Draymond of the last 2 years. And he said it about a week ago in a post-game interview, is that he refound his love for the game. And you can just see that in the way he plays, in the way that he's, dedicated himself to being in shape, to being an offensive threat, and to being just the best defender in the world, just commanding and anchoring that Warriors defense, getting people to the right spot. And the really important part about that is you never have to worry as a defender, as an on-ball defender, that you're not going to have help if you get beat. And that starts with the trust that the players have in each other. Guys have talked about it, like Bielitsa, like, you have backside help, and that really starts with Draymond kind of quarterbacking the defense and letting people know where they should be. He can effectively guard a 3-on-1 break. He guards 1 through 5. It's just the resurgence of him has been phenomenal. And, part of it that he said himself is that he really wants his kids to see how good of a basketball player that he is. And he hasn't been that player for the last 2 years, but now we got a championship like squad again, and he's a big part of why.
Definitely. I mean, getting back to those championship ways, or him being the best version of himself, is just some breath of fresh air for Warriors fans, or just for players like him in general, to know that like good stuff like that could happen again. And other players that are maybe a little bit older, that you could say their best years are behind them, are having that similar effect on the Warriors on top of Draymond. And one person like that is Iggy, who, for example, his peak might have been that 2015 Finals MVP campaign. Which that's a whole other discussion. I've never really had that with you. We definitely got to talk about that at some point. But he definitely, there's so much been said in the last few years about his sleep schedule and stuff like that. He's really been on the cutting edge of like, how can he get the absolute most out of himself? And this season looks like he's doing the same thing. He's trying to get that same mojo back from those few years ago when he really changed his game by trying all these new different things.
Yeah, Andre's missed the last few games with sore knee injury, but he probably be primed to come back sometime next week. But he will always hold a special place in the heart of Warriors fans and the organization in general for everything that he has brought us in the past, and that you really see that he continues to do this year. He's gotten up on a couple monster dunks this year, looking pretty spry. And again, it's the high IQ of a guy that knows how to play with Steph, how to get him the ball, how to move without the ball, and how to effectively use angles to be a great defender. Andre has what we would call the best hands in the NBA. He's so quick at getting steals, getting deflections, knocking the ball loose. And, just despite his age, it doesn't really matter because he's so smart of a player and he knows how to play championship basketball. And that's really the key thing. That's the DNA of this Warriors team, is that they are a very, very smart basketball team.
Definitely. And they're always going to bring something they're always going to bring to the table. And part of being a really smart team is taking players that maybe other teams don't value as much and making them really shine under your system. Otto Porter's a guy that really we don't think, it's weird. Like, he was a number 3 overall pick, but we just don't hear about him a lot or think about him a lot. And part of that is because he was always injured for such a long time. But he was one of those guys that was never really seen as what he should have been, a real piece to a team that could actually do something with him. And he's looking like someone that could actually really get good rotational minutes and really compete on this Warriors team. So what's maybe changed for him? Because he's someone that we just, as fans, wouldn't always hear about, because he was always on teams that really weren't performing too well or couldn't get on the court because of his injury history. But I feel that's a different story now, right?
Yeah, Otto's just in a perfect situation with this team in that he's not being asked to do too much. He's one of those, 3-and-D type of guys, but the way that the Warriors run their offense, a lot of split screen actions, movement off the ball, someone that knows how to make the read on the split, whether they use the screen or reject it. or if he's the passer in that situation, how to get someone the ball, or maybe when it's not necessarily the right time to throw a risky pass. Just all these things are just prime for Otto to succeed. He doesn't have to be a guy who's creating his own shot, because the Warriors system allows for those shots to be created for him. So he's really just had to buy into the way that the team plays, and he's gonna get his open looks, and he's been knocking him down. He's always been a really solid 3-point shooter, when he's been on the court, injuries or not. He's able to knock those down, and he's been doing that for the Warriors. So that's really why he's getting his moment to shine on this team. He's just bought into his role, and he's executing it to perfection.
Who are some other guys that maybe they just come to you right away? I mean, there's so many guys in this roster that maybe fit that mold, or that we probably already discussed about already, that right now in terms of approach situation, they maybe didn't see that on their other two clubs, but now with the Warriors, it's really starting to show off. I mean, some guys that come to mind, Quantas Anderson's always been with the Warriors, but he's a guy, right, that you look at him and you're like, he's really got a good fit here on this team. Or someone like an Annanya Raghavan, right? Someone that, right, on another team you really don't know where he would fit in, but with the Warriors it's kind of seamless. Like, who are some of those guys, maybe with those two included, that really show that to you?
Yeah, those two that you mentioned, JTA, Bielitsa, of course, Gary Payton. He's a 15th guy signed on the roster, was cut at the end of training camp, signed after opening day to the team. And it's, you never think of a 15 player on a roster getting like just key minutes in a game, but Gary Payton has really showed himself that he is going to be a part of this Warriors rotation and every single game, and he's done that. Starting on the defensive end, he picks up opposing teams' best players 94 feet and puts them in clamps. I watch him, and all I think is, man, I would never want to handle the ball against a guy that guards me like that. Like, it's annoying, it's frustrating, but as someone on your favorite team, as someone who loves basketball, it's just incredible to watch. And then you think about the offensive end, the Warriors are running lob plays for him that, they used to run for guys like JaVale McGee, because apparently Gary Payton can jump out of the gym, as we've seen on highlight reels circulating through social media, as I've seen in person a couple times, the kind of signature dunk that he had, Steph throwing him the lob on a fast break transition. I jumped out of my seat when I saw that at Chase. It was incredible. But you got guys like Gary Payton, Damian Lee, JTA, and then you think about another offseason signing like we've talked about, Bielitsa, and you think about where he's been in his career. He started off with the Timberwolves. He was in Sacramento. Last year he was with Miami after a trade from the Kings, and he's never really been in a situation that fits his skill set, similar to Otto Porter. Bielitsa can hit really. His range is pretty impressive. One thing that frustrates Warriors fans a little bit right now is he's not always shooting those open jumpers that he has, but he's just another really smart, savvy basketball kind of mind. Passes the ball extremely well. I've been very impressed by that, and stretches the floor and allows a lot of spacing for guys like Steph, like Jordan Poole, to go to work. And speaking of, we have to talk about Jordan Poole, as I just mentioned. His growth from year 1 to year 2 to now this season has just been off the charts. You see his dedication to being in the gym. He's got one of the most explosive first steps that I've seen. And I think the thing that really impressed me was his ability to finish at the rim, his improvement on that. I always knew, dating back to his Michigan days, that the guy could shoot the ball, but that's all I saw him as prior to coming back from the G League bubble last year and continuing into this season. Like, Jordan is able to score at all 3 levels of the floor, and it's really extended this Warriors kind of championship window.
I didn't mean to go into this show and just to go through the entire roster, but this team is really that deep. Like it really is pretty crazy. Like, and going into this, like, there's some key players, obviously Steph. Okay, we'll talk about some of these big storylines, but there's a story behind every single one of these guys. I mean, across the board. I mean, how important is the bench to this team? Like how deep they are. Like, do you have like subs must be such a difficult thing for Steve Kerr to think about because there's like 2 or 3 options he can have at each position. It's kind of weird.
It's wild. And, the Warriors kind of moniker has always been strength in numbers. And I think this season kind of embodies it more than it ever has in the past. I mean, we haven't even talked yet about a former number 1 pick, Andrew Wiggins, who has refound himself with the Warriors. I said it so much last year that my favorite Andrew Wiggins is an Andrew that plays downhill, attacks the rim. He Especially after this Minnesota game this year, he got his 2 poster dunks on Cat. He's just been keeping that same elevated level for every game following that. He's hitting the 3 well, he's defending, he's being, a third scoring option. And I think that's really where he's found his kind of niche and not being asked to be the number 2 guy, because now you got Steph, you got Poole able to create. The floor is so big and wide. Andrew is super athletic. He's now able to get to the rim, elevate, finish, get to the free throw line. It's just insane how deep this team is. It's on any given night there's a number of guys who may not get many minutes who would be playing 20 minutes anywhere else that they are, but that's what championship teams are built on, and you need that depth with an 82 game season and 16 wins. You got to get in the postseason to win a championship. So it's really well suited for this team to do well.
That's about to blow everybody's mind. I mean, one of these guys hasn't played yet in Wiseman, but we're about to talk about their rookies or sophomore or second year players that, I mean, we haven't even spoken about those, and these guys are like high lottery picks. We haven't even spoken about them yet. We're talking about all these guys that are either, whether they're in the late first round, second round guys from other teams that, other teams didn't value as much. That's who we've been talking about this whole time. But these are like the guys that are like, they're up next, right? They're coming in and the Warriors are ready for them. And right, that's kind of what's scary, is that this team isn't just good for now. They'll be good for years to come. So, I mean, whether it's right, Kuminga, Moody, I mean, Wiseman, who's now obviously working out the crews, just get back in shape. Like, where do these guys fit in this lineup with all these maybe more proven veterans that have been in the league for 7 or 8 years? But these guys are also, right, they're making a case too as to why they should get minutes. Like, how's that going to shape up?
Kuminga, in the few games that he's gotten in and gotten kind of solid minutes, I've actually been really impressed with him, and see him kind of being a guy that can rotate in as a small ball kind of 5 for the Warriors. His ability to guard kind of other teams' bigger players because of his athleticism, because of his length, and then on the other end, stretch them out to the 3-point line. Kuminga hasn't hit them that well to start the year, but I think that he has the ability to knock them down. And then when you get a big man stretch out on the 3-point line, there's no way you're going to be able to stay in front of the guy. It's just super athletic. And then you go over to Moses Moody, who has kind of proven himself a little bit more of a 3-point shooter than Kuminga has. His game maybe is a little more polished at the moment. Kuminga, I think, has higher potential than Moody does, but both of these guys have just really, really impressed to start the season when they've gotten their opportunities. And unfortunately, with the veteran depth that the Warriors had, they're not going to get a ton of minutes in every single game. So it's really taken advantage of practice time that they're going to spend in Santa Cruz, and that time that they do get, whether it's rotation in key moments of the game or in blowout games, just taking every opportunity to learn at the NBA level. And then the Warriors, I mean, you said we're not going to go through the whole roster, but it is really incredible. You got their 2-way guys, Chris Chiozza and Jeff Doughton Jr. They can also come in and serve significant minutes. Chiozza has been playing alongside Steph when they've had their thin roster the last 2 games. Damian Lee has been out, anticipating the birth of his child, which actually happened today. Congrats to Damian Lee and Steph Curry on that. But Chiozza has held his own, handling the ball alongside Steph and Jordan Poole and giving a third guard rotation. So it's so much depth, and there's not enough minutes to go around for everyone every game, but just staying ready for when that opportunity comes, and it's a lot of fun to watch.
This is all really exciting, but we've been talking. We haven't really even brought up another team outside of talking about how Cat got dunked on twice, right? But I think maybe we brought up the name Minnesota Timberwolves for that one. But in general, right, we've been talking a lot about the Warriors and how great they are. But they definitely have some competition. There's some teams out there that have some that also have some pretty good depth, have some pretty good starting, have some pretty good rosters. The Phoenix Suns, I mean, white hot right now, winning 16 in a row, are one of those teams for sure. And they're on a crash course for tomorrow. And I mean, you're smiling because I mean, we had to talk about this. What happens tomorrow? Not just in terms of that game, but like there's obviously so much significance past just a regular season game. It means so much more than that tomorrow with these two juggernauts going up against each other.
It's a really, really exciting chance for the Warriors to kind of prove themselves against the defending Western Conference champions. A lot of teams, or a lot of people kind of prior to the Warriors maybe going into Brooklyn and smashing the Knicks in that game, were saying that their schedule was so easy, and that's why they had this great start. Whatever you want to say, 18-2 was impressive to start a season. That is not easy to do. Doesn't matter what the schedule is, but now you go in to a team that, like you mentioned, has won 16 in a row. They're the defending Western Conference champions. Devin Booker has been playing incredible. Michael Bridges, great wing defender. So I'm never worried about the Warriors' offense, really. It's mostly going to come down to how well their defense plays. And I think that one big matchup that I'll be keeping my eye on is to see how they guard DeAndre Ayton, because the Warriors right now, no Wiseman, are kind of undersized at that center position. Looney can hold his own on the defensive end, but Ayton's an athletic big, so I do kind of expect to see the Warriors go small a little bit more, maybe Draymond rotating at the 5, Otto Porter playing some minutes at the 5, and perhaps we'll see some Jonathan Kuminga getting minutes in there. But, you get these back-to-back matchups with Phoenix in Phoenix tomorrow night, and then run it back on Friday at the Chase Center. Just great schedule for the Warriors up ahead, and just a great kind of early season test. Let's see how good this team really is. And you're not really seeing how good this team really is quite yet, because we don't have our guy back. But and either way, it's a good kind of way to test the waters.
I thought you were about to steal my thunder right there, because there's no better way to end off this show than talk about the great Klay Thompson. I mean, we haven't mentioned his name, I don't think once, right? I got to check back. Maybe he came up once in past. I don't think we did. I think we were very intentional about this. But I mean, come on, that's got to be exciting. I mean, that opens up. You've not just met Klay Thompson before. You've had there's a famous picture of you with him after one of those big time games last year, when obviously they weren't even any fans at the time because of COVID. So what's going through your head right now, or what's going through maybe your friends, like all your coworkers' heads? Like, everyone must be talking about this thing, how much exciting this must be to get Klay back.
It's going to be the loudest that Chase Center has ever been. There's going to be chills. There's going to be tears. All of the above coming from me. I absolutely cannot wait for this guy to get back onto the court. Like, you talk about, 900 days or something since his last NBA game. Like, and for a guy that loves the game of basketball so much, it's been so painful to see the emotion on him for not being able to play just after this last Warriors home game that they had this past week. He's sitting on the bench for 35 minutes after the game, towel over his head, just the emotion weighing on him because he's so close to finally getting to play on this court in front of fans that absolutely adore Klay. And I've seen him a little bit in kind of practice shoot around settings. He looks good. He's moving well. Obviously, he's not going to be playing his full Klay minutes when he gets back. I expect 18 to 20 to start off, no back-to-back games. but I do think Klay Thompson will be Klay Thompson. He has just one of the most beautiful, pure shooting forms that you'll ever see. Steph, the greatest shooter alive, but Klay has the most textbook shooting form in existence, and it's gonna be really a night to behold when he comes back. I mentioned that December 20th date earlier. That's what the whispers are. That will be the date that he comes back. So we'll see. Poor Sacramento Kings, as we all know, Klay dropped 37 on them in a quarter once. So whatever that date is that he comes back, it is going to be a historic night for the NBA.
Sacramento Kings, they just can't catch up. I mean, I think there's no way they're sleeping easy the night before this game. It's going to definitely be keeping them up and giving them some fits as they're trying to get ready for this game, because it is going. There's just so much going on. I can't remember the last time a regular season game had so many. Whether would it be a footnote? Is that the right way to describe it? Like, where there's so many things right coming along with this game. I don't know if I've ever seen this before.
We still don't know where Steph's 3-point record will be at that moment. Like
it'll
we
be
said,
shattered. It'll be shattered on the floors of Madison Square Garden. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry for you. That's your next.
That's true, but I mean, history is history. Look, Steph's averaging over 5 threes made a game. If he keeps up with that, or even drops a little bit below that, he'll hit it that night. So I'm not concerned. I'm looking at the numbers, and I mean, you're the stats person here, but I'm looking at the numbers right now because the numbers back me up in this, and we'll see. I'm hoping they're true to be a part of history like that. But I mean, really, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all this with us, because I honestly came into this thinking, okay, the Warriors are a great team. There's some cool storylines. We'll talk about it. Annanya is the best. Like, let's make this world work. It'll be a lot of fun. But you literally just I mean, I didn't think about the Warriors 10th, 11th, and 12th guys the way I do now. And you've had a lot of perspective. So I really want to thank you for that, because it really has helped me a lot with figuring out like, okay, this is what this team's all about. So thank you. I'm looking forward to that game tomorrow. I'll be watching. And there might there's another game tomorrow night that might have some cool graphics being put up on it on national TV. So I really urge our listeners to check out that Nets versus Knicks game. Keep an eye out. You might see some pretty cool graphics courtesy of our friends over at Google. So just putting that heads up out there for all our listeners to be mindful of that. It's going to be a lot of fun. But other than that, some great Warriors action coming up. I'll be watching. I know obviously you'll be there. And I hope our listeners are really enjoyed this episode of the No Trade Clause podcast. Appreciate all of you.
Thank you for having me, John. This was great.